Welcome to the Fathering Strong Deep Dive Discussions, where we take the latest topics posted on our blog site and with a little AI magic, thanks to Google's new Notebook LM podcast generator, provide you with an informative and interactive discussion. This week's Fathering Strong blog post, written by Urban Light Ministries president and co-founder Eli Williams, is the content source for this AI-generated conversation. Sit back and enjoy Meredith and Dylan as they deep dive and unpack today's topic.
Hey there, welcome back to the Deep Dive. You're taking a really responsible step by looking into gun safety, especially with kids at home. And you know, these articles you sent over, they really got me thinking. We've got the ABCs of gun safety, some advice from healthychildren.org, and some research from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Wow.
It's a lot to unpack, but
it is.
Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah.
It's a topic that I think is often surrounded by a lot of strong emotions, but you know, at its core, it's really about knowledge.
Yeah.
And making informed choices for your family.
Yeah, and one thing that really struck me right away was the stat from healthychildren.org.
Okay.
About a third of homes with kids in the U.S. have guns.
Wow.
And a huge number of those, we're talking millions, don't have those guns properly secured.
Right.
That's pretty alarming.
It really underscores the need for us to go beyond simply assuming it won't happen to us. Even if you're incredibly confident in your own gun safety practices, you have to think about, you know, the other environments your kids are exposed to, friends' houses, relatives.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get very focused on our own homes, but kids are constantly exploring different spaces.
Absolutely. And you know, remember, children, especially younger ones, they have that natural curiosity. They don't always fully grasp the consequences of their actions.
And speaking of, you know, kids and not always understanding consequences, the ABCs of gun safety included these incredibly poignant stories. The one about the teenager who lost his life because a friend thought a gun was unloaded.
Oh, gosh.
It just breaks your heart.
Yeah, those stories are always so hard to read, but they serve as those powerful reminders that we're not just talking about abstract statistics here.
Right.
These are real lives tragically affected by gun accidents, and often it's not, you know, malice.
Right.
It's a lack of awareness or understanding that leads to these tragedies.
It makes you stop and think. It ties into something else that just stopped me in my tracks. Ready for this? Firearms are now the leading cause of death for children and teens in the U.S.
Wow.
Not car accidents, not illnesses.
Wow.
Guns.
That's a sobering thought.
It is.
And, you know, while we may want to believe it's something that, you know, only happens in certain areas or to certain types of families,
Right.
the reality is that gun violence can touch anyone anywhere.
Which is why it's so important to understand the risk and take preventative measures, like the fact that preschoolers are among the most likely to be involved in unintentional shootings.
Yeah, and here's where I think developmental psychology really comes in.
Okay.
You know, a young child's brain isn't fully developed. Their impulse control isn't as strong.
Right.
And their understanding of death and the permanence of consequences isn't the same as an adult's. They might see a gun as a toy, something they've seen on TV, not a deadly weapon.
Okay, so knowing that, what can we actually do? Safe storage seems to be a huge theme across all of these sources.
Absolutely. The consistent message is this. If you choose to have a firearm in your home, it's your responsibility to store it safely.
Right.
Or like an unloaded, locked up, and with the ammunition stored separately.
Healthychildren.org had a really clear breakdown of this.
Yes.
Different types of locks and where to store the keys.
Yes. And they stressed that simply hiding a gun isn't enough.
Right.
Kids are curious and resourceful, and they'll often find things they're not supposed to.
Yeah.
That's why investing in a quality gun safe or lockbox is so crucial.
Yeah.
It adds another layer of protection, and it reduces those chances of an accident.
Right, because even if you think your child would never touch a gun, you can't predict what might happen in a moment of curiosity or if a friend comes over.
Right.
And it's not just about preventing accidents either, is it? I remember reading in one of these articles that secure storage can actually impact teen suicide rates.
That's right. Teenagers, especially those struggling with mental health issues, can be impulsive.
Yeah.
Secure storage creates a barrier, a time delay.
Right.
That can be crucial in preventing a tragedy.
It's almost like you're buying them time to think things through, to reach out for help.
Yeah.
It's so much more than just locking something away.
Exactly. And speaking of buying time, this is a perfect segue into the importance of communication.
Okay.
Secure storage is a vital first step, but it's only one part of the equation. We also need to be having these open and honest conversations with our kids about guns.
You're so right. And it's not just a one-time talk, is it?
No.
These conversations need to happen over time, adjusting to their age and understanding.
Absolutely.
Like a 5-year-old's conversation is going to look very different from a teenager.
Absolutely. It's about creating an ongoing dialogue, tailoring the information to their developmental stage.
Okay, so we've got safe storage and open communication. What else should we be thinking about? There was that interesting tip from Johns Hopkins about knowing your surroundings. What was that all about?
Well, they emphasize the importance of asking about guns in other homes where your children might spend time. It's not always an easy conversation to have, but as they put it, it's better to have a little discomfort now than to face a potentially life-changing event later.
I can see how that might feel awkward, but I guess you have to weigh that against the potential risks. How do you even approach that kind of conversation?
It really comes down to honesty and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
You're not accusing anyone. You're simply expressing your concern for your child's safety. You could say something like, "We're being extra cautious about gun safety at our house, and I wanted to ask about your practices." Most responsible gun owners will understand and respect your concern.
I like that it takes the pressure off and focuses on a shared goal of keeping kids safe.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, how do you navigate those situations where you might not feel comfortable with the other family's gun safety practices?
That's a tough one, and it requires some honest self-reflection. You have to weigh the potential risks against your comfort level. Maybe you limit unsupervised visits, or you talk to your child about what to do if they encounter a gun.
You know, hearing you talk about all these different layers, it makes me realize how much more there is to gun safety than I initially thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about locks and rules. It's about understanding child development, having open conversations, and being proactive about the environments our kids are in.
Exactly. And that leads us to another important consideration, gun training for kids.
Okay.
It's a topic that often sparks debate, but it's worth exploring the potential benefits and drawbacks.
I'm really interested to hear more about that, especially since the ABCs of gun safety mentioned how training could potentially increase kids' safety awareness and responsibility around firearms.
Right.
Let's delve into that after a quick break.
It's interesting because when we talk about gun training for kids,
Yeah.
it often evokes really strong reactions
Yeah.
on both sides.
I can see that for sure. It's a sensitive topic.
It is, and those reactions, I think, often stem from deeply held beliefs about guns, about safety, about personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And what's fascinating is that both sides often share the same ultimate goal: to protect kids.
Yeah.
They just have very different ideas about how to achieve that.
It's like they're coming at it from two different angles.
Exactly.
So let's unpack those different angles a bit, starting with the potential benefits of gun training for kids. What does the research say?
Well, some studies suggest that structured gun safety programs, especially those designed for youth, can lead to increased knowledge about firearms, improved handling skills, and even a greater understanding of the consequences of misuse.
So it's not just about teaching them how to shoot, it's about fostering a sense of respect and responsibility.
Exactly. And some proponents of youth gun training argue that it can actually make kids less likely to experiment with firearms
Oh, interesting.
because they understand the potential dangers.
Yeah.
And they have a healthy dose of fear, not just blind curiosity.
So knowledge becomes a deterrent rather than a trigger for risky behavior.
Right. And it can also empower kids to advocate for safety in other settings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they see a friend mishandling a gun, they might be more likely to speak up or intervene if they've had that proper training.
Okay, so there's the potential for increased knowledge, responsibility, and maybe even a bit of confidence in knowing how to handle a firearm safely.
Right.
But what about the other side of the coin? What are some of the concerns people have about gun training for kids?
Well, one common concern is that teaching kids about guns might actually make them more curious and more likely to experiment.
Right.
You know, some worry that early exposure could normalize firearms and decrease their sense of danger.
It's like that saying, forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest.
Right.
The less exposure they have, the less likely they are to be drawn to it.
Exactly. And there's also the developmental aspect to consider.
Yeah.
Younger children might not have the cognitive maturity to fully grasp those complex concepts of gun safety.
Right.
They might struggle to distinguish between real life and what they see in movies or video games.
Their brains are still developing, and they might not fully grasp the permanence of death or the potential consequences. Exactly.
Of one single action.
And some people are concerned that even with the best training, accidents can still happen.
Right.
A moment of carelessness, a lapse in judgment, and tragedy can strike.
So it's a lot to weigh.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's no easy answer, and the decision of whether or not to pursue gun training for kids is deeply personal.
It is. It's about considering your own values, your family dynamics, and your comfort level. There's no right or wrong approach, and what works for one family might not work for another.
Okay, so if someone does decide to explore gun training for their child, what are some things they should keep in mind?
Well, first and foremost, finding a qualified instructor is crucial.
Yeah.
Not all gun training programs are created equal, and you want to make sure that instructor is experienced, patient, and emphasizes safety above all else.
So doing your research is key.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't just send your kid to any soccer coach.
Right.
You'd want to make sure they have the right credentials and a good reputation.
Exactly. And think about the program's curriculum.
Does it go beyond just the mechanics of shooting? Does it include discussions about conflict resolution, emotional regulation, and responsible decision-making?
It sounds like it needs to be a holistic approach, not just about marksmanship.
Right. And don't underestimate the importance of those ongoing conversations at home.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the best training, parents need to stay involved, reinforce those safety messages, and monitor their child's behavior around firearms.
So it's almost like training is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Yes.
You're not just outsourcing the responsibility, you're adding another layer of education and support.
I love that analogy. It's about creating a culture of safety and responsibility in your home.
Yeah.
And that requires that ongoing commitment from everyone involved.
Okay, so we've covered safe storage, open communication, knowing your surroundings, and now gun training. It's amazing how multifaceted this whole issue is.
It is. And, as we're delving into these practical steps, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's also this deeper, more philosophical side to this conversation. The ABCs of gun safety touched on this when they mentioned the spiritual dimension of safety and security.
Yes, I was so intrigued by that. It almost felt like a different lens through which to view this whole issue.
It is. And I think it speaks to something that's often overlooked in these discussions.
Okay.
The fact that our beliefs, our values, and even our faith can influence our choices around guns.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the physical safety measures. It's about how we perceive and approach the idea of safety in a broader sense.
Exactly. And for some people, their faith or spirituality might play a significant role in how they navigate those choices. They might find comfort and guidance in their religious teachings or their belief in a higher power.
So it's almost like the spiritual dimension adds another layer of complexity, but also potentially another source of strength and support.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that for some people, their sense of safety and security goes beyond just the physical precautions they take.
Yeah.
It encompasses their beliefs, their values, and their relationship with something larger than themselves.
Wow, I'm really glad we touched on that. It adds a whole new dimension to this conversation.
Yeah, it really highlights the importance of approaching this topic with sensitivity and understanding.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
And what feels safe and responsible for one person might feel very different for another.
And I think it speaks to the bigger picture here, which is that gun safety isn't just about the guns themselves.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture of responsibility, awareness, and open communication
Absolutely.
within our families and communities.
It's about having those sometimes difficult conversations, respecting different viewpoints, and ultimately working together to create environments where kids can thrive and feel safe.
Going through these articles with you has been incredibly eye-opening. I came in thinking I had a pretty good grasp on gun safety, but I've realized there's so much more to it than I initially thought.
I think that's a common experience. It's a topic that's often oversimplified or presented in a very black and white way,
Yeah.
but the reality is much more nuanced.
It is. And it makes me wonder if part of the challenge is that we don't always have the language or the tools to navigate these complex conversations. Like, how do you even begin to talk to your kids about gun violence without scaring them or making them feel anxious?
That's a great question, and it's one that so many parents struggle with. I think the key is to approach it with honesty and age-appropriate language.
Yeah.
You don't have to go into graphic detail, but you can explain that guns are dangerous
Right.
and should never be touched without an adult present.
It's like teaching them about stranger danger or online safety. It's not about instilling fear. It's about empowering them with knowledge
Exactly.
and tools to make safe choices.
And remember, these conversations don't have to be one-time events.
Yeah.
I mean, you can weave them into everyday life.
Right.
Maybe while you're watching a movie or reading a news story together. It's about creating that ongoing dialogue where kids feel comfortable asking questions and sharing their thoughts.
I like that it takes the pressure off and makes it feel more natural. And, one thing that really stuck with me from our deep dive was the emphasis on knowing your surroundings.
Yeah.
It's not just about our own homes. It's about being mindful of the environments our kids are exposed to,
Right.
whether it's at a friend's house, a relative's place, or even just out in the community.
That's such an important point. And it might feel uncomfortable to ask those questions.
Yeah.
But as we discussed earlier, a little discomfort is a small price to pay for peace of mind.
You're so right. And you gave some great advice on how to approach those conversations in a way that feels respectful and non-confrontational. It's not about accusing anyone.
Right.
It's about expressing your concerns as a parent.
Exactly.
And working together to create a safe space for your child.
And, even if those conversations feel a bit awkward at first, they can actually open the door to deeper connections and understanding. You might be surprised by the willingness of others to collaborate and prioritize safety.
That's a really encouraging thought. It's like you're building a network of support, a community of people who are all committed to the same goal
I love that image.
of protecting kids.
And ultimately, that's what it's all about. It's about recognizing that gun safety isn't just an individual responsibility, it's a collective effort.
Yes.
It takes all of us working together to create a culture of safety and responsibility that benefits everyone.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
The startling statistics, the emotional impact of gun violence, the importance of safe storage and open communication,
Yeah.
the nuances of gun training, and even the spiritual dimension of safety and security.
Yeah,
It's been an incredibly informative and thought-provoking journey.
it has. And I hope it's empowered you with the knowledge and the confidence to make the choices that feel right for your family.
Absolutely. And, if any of this has sparked more questions for you, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It means you're engaging with the material and thinking critically about what gun safety means in your own life. Don't hesitate to reach out to reputable organizations like the ones we mentioned in the articles, or consult with experts in your community.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to navigate these complex issues and make choices that align with your values and your priorities.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into gun safety.
Thank you.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those conversations going with your family, your friends, and your community.
Because ultimately it's through dialogue, through education, and through a shared commitment to safety that we can create a world where all children can grow up feeling secure and protected.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening to the Deep Dive Discussion, brought to you by Fathering Strong and Google's Notebook LM AI Podcast Generator. The content for this AI-generated conversation is this week's Fathering Strong blog post, written by Urban Light Ministries President and co-founder Eli Williams. For more information on this and other important topics and a wealth of free father-focused resources, please visit www.urbanlight.org.